Hey, everybody. Oh, I'm blurry.
Ah.
Why doesn't it look at me? Come on. You know what a face looks like. Don't I have facial? There you go. Hey, everybody. CodePen Radio number 420 Classic. We're going to be talking about blocks. What is a block? It's just a word we kind of invented, and other apps use it too. I want to make sure there's no confusion how CodePen is using the term block, so we're going to just talk a bunch about blocks. That is, Stephen and I are going to talk a bunch about blocks. What's up,
everybody?
Stephen? Hey. Let's get block. We're using new words, new terminology in the 2.0 editor. We're going to say things like the CodePen compiler. That's something we've named. We didn't even come up with a fun name. Maybe we should have. Maybe we will if we open source it someday. But for now, we call it the CodePen compiler because, that's what we call it internally anyway. And that's what it does. It compiles your code. We kind of had a compiler in the old editor, but it was really just like a bunch of shoestring code that kind of just processed some files and stuck them together. It had plenty of smarts, but it wasn't like, take this file, send them through this very explicit API call that and does some work and comes out the other side. This is
not a formal system at all.
Yeah,
but
that's a good way of putting it. Very much a formal system. In fact, it could just be an executable. Really, it could be. It's a thing that processes code in its own way. How am I going to explain that? So why do we call blocks? What is a block in CodePen? You can open up like a modal that comes up that says add blocks, and there'll just be a bunch of technology in there that you already know. So it's not unfamiliar in that something like Sass is a block on CodePen, and you add blocks to a pen. That's what a block is. But like some things are blocks and some things aren't blocks. And hopefully it's not terribly confusing, but here's a way to think about it, is that anything that processes code, that like it goes into that thing and then it comes out different code, that's a block. It needs to be processed. That's why Sass is a block. Sass takes, Sass, you could pass a string to the Sass compiler and it will come out as a different string. It was more common to pass it a file that comes out a different file. But that's what Sass is. Because it processes code, it's a block. Because Less processes code, it's a block. Because Babel processes code, it's a block. TypeScript processes code from your TypeScript syntax into JavaScript syntax. That's a block then because it's processed code. Now that's important to think about because there are things that just aren't blocks. Like imagine something like Lodash. Well, you install it the same way you would Sass, kind of, right? Like you npm install Sass, you npm install Lodash too. But Lodash is just like a file that you link up and then you use the JavaScript functions that it exports. It's not transforming your code. It's just a resource.
The distinction there is like, what does it take to get your code to the web versus what's something that runs when it's on the web? So the blocks kind of take your code before it gets to that rendered preview and make that rendered preview actually possible. And then anything beyond that is just like a library, right. like Lodash or whatever, that will run actually on the client. There you
go, Lodash. Think of Moment.js as having a moment because it's being replaced essentially by the temporal API in JavaScript. But it's got people thinking like, I don't need Moment.js anymore. Moment.js is like like jQuery or MooTools or whatever. You just link it up and then you use it. So even though both of those things might like exist on NPM, for example, they behave differently. People are also familiar with a build process. We don't shy away from that on CodePen. You can see the build process that runs. The CodePen compiler runs a build process, and that build process is composed of blocks. You can see everything it's doing by it going through blocks. And you notice they're vertically stacked. That's kind of the metaphor that we're leaning into with blocks, is that your build is a stack of blocks. What's your stack, man? But I think people used to talk about that. Not used to, they talk about it now. If you ask somebody like, hey, we're building a new product, two nerds sitting at a bar, they'd say, yeah, what stack did you use? And then they'd go through their laundry list of the things that they use, like, yeah, is it Next.js or what,
Is it a jam stack?
Yeah. I like the word stack. I think that's cool. It's a way of describing like what's all the stuff y'all use, you know? So something like Prettier is a block that you can add because it processes your code. It takes it in and it indents it in a nice way that just keeps it real pretty as you're working on it. Super useful. So that's what we call a formatter block. Blocks do have types. Formatter blocks, in our case, they run first. So you'll see a build process run. It'll hit Prettier and do a bunch of stuff. And then it'll kind of go back and run another build process because everything's been Prettiered now, and it'll run the rest of the blocks. That's just like an implementation detail that you don't really need to know.
And it mostly just happens on save so that it's not messing with your code as you type.
Most blocks are just processor style blocks. Some of them are formatting. Some of them are linting. Linting does need to be processed. You know, it's kind of like you can imagine something like how ESLint works. I don't think we have an ESLint block yet. I think that might be a secret PR I have I have coming, but we have JSLint in there, like kind of the OG JavaScript linter that, you know, what it returns in the case is a block can return two things, because we'll get into this a little bit, but a block has a very specific API contract it has to maintain with CP compiler. And it either like returns a success response with the files that it is now done working with, or it says, that didn't work out. I'm sending you some diagnostic information about why it didn't, or it could be both, honestly. It could return the files and some diagnostic information.
And it can also return patches.
Yes, and it can return patches as well. Like I have some changes to make. That's how a formatting block would work, is like, hey, this file was fine, but this one, you actually need to change some lines of code in here, and these are the patches that you need to apply. A bunch of different blocks do that. That's a good point. These blocks, gosh, they're powerful. But a Prettier or a linting block would just return diagnostic information, like these linters. It'd just be like, hey, there's a problem in this file on this line with this error message, and you should check it out. And we make that experience pretty nice, actually. I'm pretty proud of our diagnostic experience. I think is really nice.
That was a long process.
Okay. Yeah, it was. It was indeed. So packages, again, like Lodash or Moment.js are things you can think about. Even React, actually, really is just an NPM package. And we'll do a different show on that. We do help you with your packages also, but you won't see like Lodash in your build process. Hopefully that makes sense to a lot of you, but it's not really there. What you will see probably, depending on how you link it up, I guess, is a packages block running. We do determine like, oh, hey, they're trying to use stuff from NPM. We'll help them do that. And you'll see the package that you're using in a package.json file and yada, yada. Like we'll go into that in a different episode, but just because Lodash isn't a block doesn't mean you can't use it. Certainly we help you out in a different way using that.
Right. But React is a library, essentially. But it has special syntax that does need processing, JSX. So
yeah, like theoretically you could write React without JSX, but I don't think anyone in the whole world does that. Like there's probably nobody's writing react.create element calls manually or whatever. You just let JSX turn into that. It's ergonomically nice. I mean, put me on the record as being a JSX enjoyer. I think it's nice how nicely it prettifies and all that stuff. So yeah, you're right. React is not a block because React doesn't transform your code. I say that even though everybody knows React is shipping a compiler now, that will need to be a block because it really does change your code. So, but we don't have the React compiler as a block yet. But React just as a package, you can just use that client side, no block required whatsoever. But as soon as you're writing JSX, then, you know, actually you do need a block. And our default for transforming your JSX is Babel. Babel's like the classic thing that has that job. So it can do it. There are other things that can transform JSX. I don't think we offer any of them quite at the moment, but they're coming, you know. When I say they're coming, I really actually mean it too. It's kind of a funny thing in that, remember I talked just briefly that there's like this API contract between the compiler and blocks. That's really true. We really held really strong to that, meaning that there's just no code, because you know you start leaking it in a little bit, and then the complexity starts getting hard. Because we
special logic.
special logic, be like, if this block, then do this special behavior. You start losing the plot on stuff like that, and adding more blocks actually becomes harder because you have to think about each of those pieces of logic and if they still hold up as you add blocks. Because there's none of that logic, our goal is to have our velocity of adding blocks be faster. Like we're adding a block, because as long as we enforce that API contract, we can add as many blocks as we want, and it doesn't increase the complexity for us or, crucially, you either. You can use as many blocks as you'd like. In the old editor, remember, there's like a select dropdown. You could only pick one for CSS processing. That's not that weird, because like who's using Sass and less at the same time? But now you absolutely could.
You could.
You can do, yeah, there's really nothing stopping you. But there are cases now where it's more common to use, the classic was always Sass and post CSS. You'd run post CSS after your Sass and it would do extra special things for you. You can absolutely do that now. But you could add other things too. Like if you like how Lightning minifies, then use Lightning too. Lightning is a PR still, but it will be in there very soon, I promise. I'm telling you, these blocks are coming hot and fast at you. So, let's say you're writing in React and you write TSX. That's more and more common. In fact, I just spoke to the kids at the local college here, and they're in like Next.js class. I think they have two years of Next.js training essentially at OSU, and they write in TypeScript. I think it may or may not be mandatory, but obviously they're creating a lot of TSX files. TSX requires 2 blocks. Maybe
can't
not
run that on the web. Gotta
certainly
do some
not.
stuff with it.
TSX means TypeScript and JSX. So I don't even remember which one runs first. It doesn't matter. CodePen will figure it out for you. There probably is tools that do it all at once, or who knows internally what they do. But you'll see when you use TSX at CodePen, it'll run the Babel block to do the JSX processing, and it'll run TypeScript too. That gives you a lot of control and a lot of config possibility as well too. All these blocks are configurable. So while you don't need to worry about how they wire up together, you have all the control in the world on how individually they process. So if you have your very special TS config, that's how you like TypeScript to go, we will totally honor that. Unless what you're asking for is not to produce a source map, and then we will force you to do that. I forget why we do that exactly, but it's in your best interest anyway. We're just saving you from yourself. So that's pretty cool. I would say that a lot of people I was listening to some show about React usage and how many people use React through Vite, which I think is basically everybody that isn't using Next.js or TanStack Start or one of these other ones. Plenty of people make their React apps just through Vite and like React Router or whatever. Vite definitely processes your files. Vite is a block, yeah? And we have it for another reason too, right?
Right, because Vue is also one of those weird ones where it is a client-side library, but it also requires some processing. So you can create a .vue file, and then it'll add the Vue block, and we process that through Vite. But that's all technically
so it's
one
a double.
block,
That's another double too.
Yeah. And it all works together to compile that Vue file and actually render that in the input.
So hopefully that's not terribly confusing. We've been looking at it for so long that we're like, oh yeah, you just use the Vite. We actually call it the Vue/Vite block, don't we? I think we do. Because then you can clearly see that you get both. I think a ton of people, if not the absolute vast majority, who use Vue use Vite because it's from the same creator and it was really built for that. It's like a match made in heaven kind of thing. Yeah. But Steven's right. You don't need to. Vue is famously, I've interviewed Evan Yu. He's famously like, this should just work in the browser, and it does. It works fine in the browser. But like, then you don't get the .vue files, which are so nice. They're so
It's the same as like React without JSX. You could do it. You could do it all in the browser. But having the .vue file convention with style and script and the template all integrated.
Even like hits it a little harder. Like Vue React without JSX is much weirder than Vue without Vite, I think. Anyway, that's a debate for another day, I suppose. But yeah, when you add the Vue block, you're getting Vue and Vite, and that's a block. And we're just giving you that as a nice little package together. So it's not quite the same as like a super generic, like do whatever you want with Vite block. Maybe we'll give you that someday. I don't know. That day's not today. In this case, if you want Vite, you're getting a kind of a Vite that's kind of pre-configured to handle Vue specifically. Now that is what we're calling a base block, which you may not see in the UI just yet, but we do have it as a concept for us. Is base blocks are things like static site generators that are coming to CodePen. So we want you to build more complete websites using CodePen. Those are things that, in a sense, a way to think about it is a processor that's got to run last, you know?
Well, and it also kind of looks at the whole file system rather than just like a specific file type. The base blocks are a little more comprehensive. That's a nice way to think about it. Yeah, when we're running the SAS block, we don't need to send every single file in the world to that block. Without getting into the specifics of it, it can be done a little bit more efficiently than that. And it's kind of neat. This is this is one of the reasons we went with this architecture at all. This is not, as far as I know, been done before in the world of like building a compiler, is that, for example, when we start offering more of these things, base blocks, we have one now. Vue Vite is a base block, technically, how we implement it. You don't have to configure Vite to deal with your SAS. You do in the real world. If you download Vite and you want it to process your SAS, you're going to be thinking about a plugin. You're going to be thinking about how does Vite think about and handle this situation. You're going to be asking your agent to figure it out for you, or reading docs, or figuring it out in some way. You don't have to think about that on CodePen. You just make a SAS file and you link it up, and don't worry about it. We got it. Don't worry about configuring your stuff for that. The whole point
it's totally
of blocks
not necessary.
is to kind of package everything together and just make it as easy as possible for you to use a particular language or technology, so that you don't have to worry about wiring it up with everything else. It's going to handle itself, and it'll pass everything along in a way that all the other blocks can interact with.
Yeah, just exhale, make some tea. You don't have to worry about how those things go together.
You're not even going to have time to make tea,
works,
though. It's too fast.
That's true. Yeah, it's true. Just make your tea on the top of the CPUs that run this process for you. You don't have to worry about how it's wired together. You can individually configure them together, though. But the reason isn't because of the architecture of the system. It means by the time Vite is running, there are no SCSS files left. They've already been compiled down to their web primitive of CSS. Thus, Vite doesn't need to care. And that's true of all of it. Vite isn't going to deal with your TypeScript either, because by the time it comes around, Vite could deal with your TypeScript. Like, that could be a thing. Maybe we'll allow that at some point. But the architecture is like, we wanted you to not have to worry about that. Vite doesn't have to worry about it either. By the time it's involved, have already become JavaScript files, and it doesn't need to bother with it. That means you can combine these blocks kind of infinitely, and you don't have to worry about wiring them together. It's not because we're secretly really quick Googling how Vite and SAS work together and typing it in for you really quick. It's because it doesn't matter, because the way the system is architected. So you don't have to worry about that. I know that sounds complicated in a way, but the end result for you is that I've used this metaphor too much, but you kind of just go shopping for blocks. You just be like, I want this, I want this, I want that. Or you don't even open that modal. You just type in, this is tabs.tsx, and we'll be like, oh, TSX, I know how to do that, and we'll handle that for you. TypeScript gets automatically added. When you import React, that automatically activates the Babel block to make sure that JSX processing is happening correctly, and it's just going to feel good. You just kind of get to work, and things start happening for you. So a block is anything that processes code for you on CodePen. If you want a specific block, please let us know. It shouldn't be, our goal is to increase our velocity of kicking out these new blocks. It feels weird. We had so much work for so long on this that the blocks we launch with are very similar to the languages that we already supported on CodePen, but you'll see new stuff in there. Vite is new, absolutely new to the new editor. What else do we got? Tailwind is in there. Tailwind is absolutely new to the new editor. That's a block. Stuff like that. What else are you thinking about?
Well, blocks, the great aspect of them, you don't really have to think about it. If you just name the file the right thing of the language you want to write, we're going to process that and handle it for you, and it's amazing. We even have like some special internal blocks that handle things for you, like linking up files. So you don't have to think about if it's style.css or style.scss. We're going to handle that and change those links for you in the preview output so that everything's wired up and ready to go. And that's quite beautiful.
Yeah, that's nice. You'll see some of these blocks running. Some of them you can add and remove, like Sass. If you add it, you'll see it in the build process. You can technically remove it too if you want to, of course. Some of them you can't because there are built-in blocks. That's a good point, Stephen. I forgot to mention our built-in blocks that do certain code processing. We didn't want to hide that from you. We're trying to kind of reduce the magic here, but the linking one is really cool there. How it kind of get you might think, oh gosh, which file do I link up? Is it the unprocessed one or the processed one or whatever? It's kind of like, I don't know, either one. Do what you want. We'll figure it out. But that's not my favorite one. My fingerprinting is my favorite one. Yeah. I think that's my favorite thing of all. You know, it came up as I was working on I was playing with the geolocation element in HTML. Have you seen that yet? It's like angle brackets geolocation. That's what it is. And it comes out as a button element, and you click that button and it fires off a geolocation event, and then you can use that in JavaScript if you want. But the reason it's kind of a button is that it'll do the prompting if you haven't approved it yet. You know how the default on a website is that you have to ask. So basically the first time you ever click that on a website, it asks you, is this cool or not cool? And the advantage to having a button is if you say it's not cool, it will not geolocate you, but then you're not trapped in the like, oh shoot, I said no, but I really meant to say yes. Good luck figuring out how to reactivate that if you're not a pretty hardcore web. But now you just press the button again and now you can approve it. It's a nice upgrade for HTML, but here's the deal. It's tied to a domain. CodePen's previews are on a steady domain. So if you approve that once, it's all good. We did that very much on purpose, pretty much for this reason exclusively. Because if we had it such that we would break the domain and give you a different subdomain for a new build, well, that's got advantages for us because it means that caching is broken and you're going to see the latest of your work. It'd actually be pretty nice for us if we gave you a new subdomain every time, but it'd be bad for stuff like geolocation. So we solved it in another way that's even better, is that every file that gets produced, let's say your CSS gets processed because it's changed, when we link it up with the link Stephen mentioned, the linker block, we link it up with a unique fingerprint from that build, which means we're breaking the cache. And you should break the cache because the file changed. So it needs to break cache. But that means we can use the same subdomain to show you the preview because we know that the cache will get broken successfully because we've fingerprinted that document. So when you see fingerprint, I know it might be a little weird, especially to new users. They're like, what is this? What are you, the FBI or what, you know? But it's just making sure that we're serving up the freshest, best file for you, but serving it up in a way that we're talking a lot about breaking cache, but that means we're really enabling cache. If you don't change that CSS file, that means your browser is going to hang on to that file for a year and it won't re-request it
at all,
which is really nice. That's just a block that you get for free. It's a more efficient system than what is it, the other one called? E-tags?
Right.
E-tags are slow. We are not an e-tag company. We do your fingerprinting for you. Very powerful. And we have that kind of ability because of CodePen compiler and the coolness of blocks. Let's end it up by just mentioning the classic block because this is early on in the release of our public beta of this product. This is, I may have been Stephen's brainchild, this beautiful little classic block idea, isn't it?
It's so one of the struggles with 2.0 is balancing what the classic editor does versus what we want the future of CodePen to be. And, you know, the idea of blocks and extensibility is awesome. But there's we want flexibility with that. So the index.html in a pin is a real HTML file. It's got a head in there. It's got link tag and script tag and all that to wire everything up for you. A lot of people don't want to see all that when they're looking at a pin. So we created the classic block that basically does all that for you, and you can just start typing away like in the body, like the classic editor will do. So if you just name it index.pin.html or index.pin.md or
index.pin.pug. I love that's one of my favorite features is that it works. Yeah. I love it. It's so cool.
It'll just wire everything up for you. It's got some configuration, so you can add the like external scripts kind of stuff and all that, and it'll do it all for you.
Yeah, it's nice in that I think what maybe pushed us finally to actually doing this, because this wasn't an idea from day one. This was kind of a nice idea toward the end, and it will happen when you convert a pen too. It will use this format so that it looks a little bit more familiar, like how you left it. Was the idea that you're trying to show somebody a very like small focused bit of HTML, and you don't want them distracted by, looking at the CSS file you linked up in the head or something like that. And then you're like, okay, well, you can have it. So you can really make the new editor look very, very, very a lot like the old editor. Yeah. The classic editor, as we're calling it. Yeah, beautiful idea. Forgot you could do it with Markdown. Index.pen.md is a great file. You can just start blasting Markdown, and it knocks out a really nice Markdown document in a complete HTML document, which Markdown normally doesn't do. It just gives you that's pretty cool. I should show you what I'm working on.
It's a pain to write Markdown, like the full HTML document in Markdown. Like it's weird. So like
you can, but it's really super weird.
Yeah,
so not ideal.
Just use pen.md. It's great.
Yeah. That's what I can't show it on this. Well, I could, but it'd be weird. I found, I was obsessed for a little while with like CSS resets, like the ones that people write for themselves that are like, I do, I knock out this styling, I add this styling, but you're just trying to, gone are the days where you're just trying to make the browsers the same, because that's mostly been handled, but people like put their own little twists on it or whatever, but they try to do very little. There's this other category of things that even more people have done over the years. It makes me really want to do my own. It's called a classless framework in CSS, where no classes, but you just assume semantic HTML, but you're free to do whatever styling you want. So tables have really nice styles, and lists, and like maybe you'll do something fancy with the nav tag or something, but no classes. Just semantic HTML. And I bet there's about 40 of them I found out there on GitHub. So I made a pen that allows you to kind of randomly cycle through the look. And it's cool. How Markdown doesn't really do classes either. To me, it's kind of like, these are CSS files that you would apply to an index.pen.md file, because what you want is just beautifully styled, complete Markdown documents.
Yeah, that's a great pair.
Yeah, great pair. All right, well, that's blocks. I do want to know what you want. We've had some requests already. We had a strong request for a svelte block. I would love to make a svelte block. A svelte is it's different from React and Vue in that it has to be compiled. That is a compiled language. That's one of its strengths, really. So that's going to be a perfect block that I'm going to say there's a 99% chance we build. Coming soon. All right, that's our half an hour. Final thoughts?
Use blocks, get familiar with them, but you really don't even have to think about them. Like it's so great. Like it really is just invisible for the most part. And then go to town.
All right, see you later. See you next time. Sayonara. Eat your vegetables.